You cannot control the storm, but you can control your ship. Anger, fear, and emotion will try to sink you, but only if you let them. The Stoics did not seek to destroy feelings. They sought to master them. Today you will learn how. For 3 hours, imagine standing in the presence of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, not as silent statues from history, but as living mentors teaching you the art of emotional mastery. This is not a call to suppress your humanity, it is a call to harness it. When anger clouds your vision, fear freezes your movement, or emotion overwhelms your reason, the Stoic path offers a compass pointing toward clarity and strength. Let us walk through 6 pillars of Stoic discipline that will free you from emotional captivity. When we talk about mastering anger, fear, and emotion, the first battlefield is not out there in the world. It's inside your own mind. The Stoics understood something that most people never truly grasp. Events themselves do not disturb us. It is our interpretation of those events, our judgments, that ignite the emotional fire. A harsh word from a stranger, a delay in your plans, a loss you didn't anticipate. These things are simply facts, pieces of reality falling into place. But the moment we attach a label, the moment we tell ourselves a story about what happened, "Oh, this is unfair, this is a disaster, this shouldn't have happened to me," that is when the storm begins to brew. Epictetus said it plainly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Imagine that phrase not as an inspirational quote on a coffee mug, but as a rule for life. If you accept it fully, it becomes impossible for anyone or anything to steal your inner peace without your permission. A person insults you. That is sound carried on air, nothing more. You decide if those vibrations carry poison or if they pass harmlessly by. Someone cuts you off in traffic. That's the movement of metal and glass, not a personal attack on your dignity. The mind adds the insult. The mind also has the power to remove it. This is why the Stoics trained themselves to pause before passing judgment. They understood that our immediate perception is often flawed, clouded by habit and ego. If you can create even the smallest gap between what happens and what you think about what happens, you create the space for wisdom. Anger thrives in that instant of unexamined judgment. When you assume an insult, assume an injustice, assume an intent, fear grows there too. When you see uncertainty and instantly label it as danger. But when you hold back your verdict, when you look at the event itself before coating it in meaning, you strip away the fuel that these emotions feed on. This isn't about becoming cold or robotic. The Stoics were not emotionless statues. They simply refused to be slaves to their first reaction. Think of Marcus Aurelius, an emperor facing betrayal, war, and disease, not in theory but in daily reality. In his private writings, he would remind himself to meet each moment as it is presented without adding unnecessary weight to it. He practiced seeing events as neutral and only afterward deciding with reason how to respond. That practice allowed him to remain steady while the empire shook around him. It's easy to see how this applies to anger. If someone criticizes you unfairly, you might feel a surge of heat in your chest, a tightening in your jaw. In that moment, most people go straight from sensation to action, shouting, insulting back, maybe even escalating to something worse. But the Stoic learns to insert a thought between sensation and action. Is this worth my energy? Is this truly an attack on me? Or is it simply their opinion? Most of the time, the fire cools in those few seconds. What was about to become a verbal war fizzles into nothing. And here's the secret. Even if the criticism was valid, that pause gives you the space to respond constructively instead of defensive. Fear works the same way. You might hear unsettling news about the economy, your health, or the future in general. The mind wants to leap ahead, building vivid images of catastrophe. But again, those are judgments, predictions your mind creates, not facts about the present. By seeing your perception for what it is, you can keep fear from turning a possible challenge into a certain nightmare. Seneca advised rehearsing challenges in your mind not so you would suffer twice, but so that when reality finally arrived, you could meet it with clarity instead of panic. That clarity begins with noticing, right now, my fear is coming from the picture I'm painting, not the thing itself. This way of seeing requires practice. It's like strengthening a muscle you've ignored for years. At first, the gap between event and judgment is almost invisible. You'll still get swept away before you even notice what's happened. But each time you pause, each time you say to yourself, This is just an impression, not the truth yet. You build the ability to step outside the first wave of emotion. Over weeks, months, and years, that gap grows wide enough for you to steer your mind instead of being dragged behind it. The modern world gives us constant opportunities to train this skill. Social media, for example, is a perfect arena. A stranger's comment can spark instant outrage, but ask yourself, why give power to someone you've never met, whose life you do not control, whose words vanish into the endless scroll? The Stoic would read the comment, note the reaction rising, and then ask, is this worth disturbing my inner peace? 99 times out of 100. The answer is no. And this principle isn't just for personal calm. It's for leadership, relationships, and every form of human interaction. A leader who reacts to every problem with anger creates chaos. A parent who meets every misstep with fury teaches fear, not wisdom. But someone who can see clearly before judging can choose their tone, their timing, and their action deliberately. That choice is the difference between creating harm and creating harmony. In truth, perception as the gatekeeper is the root of all the other Stoic disciplines. If you master this, if you learn to distinguish between what happens and the story you tell about it, you will already have disarmed much of your anger, dissolved much of your fear, and steadied your emotional life. The world will not suddenly become kinder or easier. People will still insult, accidents will still occur, uncertainty will still loom. But they will meet a mind that refuses to be ruled by the first impulse, a mind that stands as its own master. And that is the beginning of real freedom. If perception is the gatekeeper, then the next discipline is learning to separate what is within your control from what is not. The Stoics treated this as the dividing line between peace and turmoil, between strength and weakness. Life will hand you 1,000 situations in which your influence is limited or non-existent. A storm comes, a market crashes, someone chooses to betray your trust. In all of these, you may have a voice, you may have a preference, but you do not have full command. And yet much of our suffering comes from pretending we can control these things. Or worse, from wasting our energy in trying. Imagine carrying a bucket of water through a desert. Every drop is precious. Now imagine that every moment you spend thinking about things beyond your reach is like tipping that bucket just enough for the water to spill into the sand. You may not notice at first, but by the time you truly need that strength, when a real decision, one you can act on, arrives, you'll have nothing left. That is what happens when you pour your attention into the uncontrollable. Epictetus told his students to make this distinction the first task of every day. Ask yourself, what here is mine to manage, and what belongs to fate? This isn't an excuse to be passive or fatalistic. It's the opposite. It's a way of reclaiming the only thing you have ever truly owned, your will, your actions, your choices. If the weather turns bad, you cannot command the skies to clear, but you can choose whether you carry an umbrella, whether you complain, whether you let the rain ruin your day. The rain belongs to the world. Your response belongs to you. Think of how much lighter your life would feel if you truly let go of the weight of other people's choices. You cannot control whether someone likes you. You cannot control whether they choose kindness or cruelty. But you can control whether their behavior dictates your own. If a friend withdraws from you, you can reach out. You can speak honestly. You can keep your own heart open. But the decision to return or to walk away, that belongs to them. Once you see that clearly, you can meet their choice without bitterness, because you know it was never yours to hold in the first place. Fear often comes from misunderstanding this boundary. We fear losing our job, our health, our possessions, as though by fearing we could somehow lock them in place. But Stoicism teaches that fear changes nothing except our ability to live well in the present. The job may still be lost, the body may still weaken, the possessions may still break or disappear. The only thing fear does is consume the energy we could have spent preparing for change or adapting to it. When you shift your focus to what is within your control, fear has less room to grow. You stop asking, what will happen? And start asking, how will I meet what happens? This principle also applies to anger. Many conflicts drag on because both sides are trying to control the other, trying to change a person's mind, force a confession, win an argument, But a Stoic sees that persuasion, while possible, is never guaranteed. You can speak your truth clearly, you can listen, you can offer reason. But the moment you cross into the territory of demanding control over another's mind or actions, you step into frustration. It's like trying to command the sea to be still. It only makes the waves seem tall. There's a kind of humility in this discipline, because it reminds you that you are not the center of the universe. Nature has its own rules, its own rhythms, and you are a participant, not a ruler. Even Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the largest empire in the known world, understood this. He wrote to himself as a man, not as an emperor. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. For him, this was not a poetic thought. It was a survival strategy. Wars could be lost, allies could betray, plagues could sweep through the cities, but his mind, his choices, his virtue, those could remain untouched if he guarded them. To live this way requires constant awareness. Throughout the day, you'll be tempted to grip tighter on things already slipping through your fingers. You'll catch yourself arguing with reality, insisting that it should be different. The practice is in catching yourself, loosening your grip, and turning your attention to what you can actually shape. That might mean instead of worrying about tomorrow's meeting, you prepare for it. Instead of replaying an insult from last week, you decide how you want to carry yourself today. Instead of obsessing over whether someone will forgive you, you focus on living in a way that earns respect, whether they see it or not. And this is where the true power lies. When you stop pouring yourself into the impossible, you discover how much capacity you have for the possible. The energy you used to spend on resisting reality can now be spent on building something, learning something, healing something. The harder path is to hold your ground, to feel the pull of your ego demanding satisfaction, and still choose to remain in control. That is the kind of strength that the Stoics admired, not the strength of the fist, but the strength of the will. And what happens when you make this pause a habit? You begin to notice a shift in the texture of your days. Fewer arguments escalate. Fewer words leave your mouth that you later wish you could recall. Relationships that once seemed tense or fragile become steadier because you are no longer adding fuel to every spark. You also gain the quiet confidence of knowing that you do not need to win every instant exchange because you are playing a longer game, one measured not in quick victories, but in lasting peace. There will be times when you fail, of course, times when the insult hits deeper than you expected, or when fear drives you to act before you have gathered yourself. But failure here is not the end. It is part of the training. Each time you reflect afterward, you strengthen your awareness for next time. The Stoics did not expect perfection. They expected discipline, which is nothing more than repeated practice over time. And this practice is not meant to strip you of all emotion. It is meant to give your emotions a seat at the table without letting them seize the head of it. When you pause, you can still choose to be firm, to express your anger, to act on your fear, but now it is a choice, not a reflex. That difference, subtle as it may seem, is the dividing line between mastery and servitude to your impulses. In the end, the pause is about reclaiming ownership of your own mind. It is the space in which you remember everything you have learned about perception and control, the space in which you turn the reins back in your own hands. In that space, you are no longer dragged by the horse, you are guiding it. And the more you practice, the longer and surer that space becomes, until even in the heat of life's sharpest moments, you can stand within it, calm and clear, deciding for yourself how the story will go. Once you learn to pause, the question becomes, how do you make that pause strong enough to hold when the world truly tests you? It's easy to remain calm when the air is still, when the seas are smooth. But life does not stay calm for long, and you cannot expect to be steady in the storm if you have never practiced in rough water. This is why the Stoics deliberately sought out discomfort, not as a way to punish themselves, but as a way to build the inner muscles that would hold firm under pressure. Think of it like a soldier training before battle. The soldier does not wait until the enemy is at the gates to learn how to fight. He trains in the mud, under the weight of armor, in heat and cold, so that when real danger comes, his body knows what to do. The Stoic trains in the same way, but the battlefield is the mind. By choosing small hardships in daily life, you remind yourself that you can endure far more than comfort has led you to believe. Marcus Aurelius slept on the floor during military campaigns, even though, as emperor, he could have demanded the finest bed. Seneca sometimes wore rough clothing and ate the plainest food for days, not because he could not afford better, but because he wanted to prove to himself that he did not depend on luxury for his peace of mind. These were not grand gestures for show, they were rehearsals for reality. Sooner or later, fortune will strip something from you. If you have already lived without it by choice, its loss will not undo you. Discomfort is also a teacher of perspective. When you voluntarily fast for a day, a simple meal becomes a feast. When you walk instead of drive, you remember that movement is a gift. When you leave your phone in another room, you realize how much noise you've been carrying. These small acts sharpen gratitude, and gratitude is one of the surest ways to disarm anger. And it's hard to be consumed by rage over life's inconveniences when you've trained yourself to see each comfort as a bonus, not a guarantee. There is another benefit, quieter but just as powerful. Discomfort humbles you. When you step into the cold shower, when you push yourself to lift the heavier weight, when you sit with an itch instead of scratching it, you are reminded that you are not always in control, and that's a good thing. You learn to yield without breaking, to endure without complaint. This humility carries into the rest of life. You stop expecting the world to bend to your preferences, and you start focusing on how to adapt yourself to the world as it is. Fear begins to loosen its grip as well. Much of what we fear is simply the unfamiliar. The pain we think we cannot bear, the loss we imagine will ruin us. But when you meet discomfort on purpose, you make the unfamiliar familiar. The cold water that once seemed unbearable becomes something you can stand in. The silence that once felt like loneliness becomes a place of clarity. Every time you step into discomfort by choice, you tell your mind, this is survivable, and the more you survive, the less your fear controls you. Of course, the Stoic approach to discomfort is not about recklessness. The aim is not to harm yourself, but to strengthen yourself. There's no virtue in breaking your health or pushing beyond reason. The point is to taste just enough difficulty to train your resilience. Like a blacksmith tempering steel, you want to pass through heat and pressure in measured amounts so that you emerge harder, sharper, and more flexible, not brittle and shattered. Even in modern life, opportunities for this practice are everywhere. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Turn the heat down in winter or the air conditioning up in summer. Carry your groceries without a cart. Fast from certain foods for a week. Speak less and listen more, even when you want to fill the silence. None of these things will make you famous, but they will make you formidable. And here's where it ties back to mastering anger, fear, and emotion. When you train in discomfort, you become less reactive because fewer things catch you by surprise. You already know what hunger feels like, so you don't panic when a meal is delayed. You've practiced physical strain, so you don't crumble when work demands more of you than expected. You've endured small inconveniences without complaint, so larger ones feel less like personal attacks. The storm may still be violent, but it no longer finds you fragile. The modern world tells you to seek comfort at all costs, to soften every edge, cushion every step, and avoid anything that feels unpleasant. But the Stoic sees comfort as a sweet dessert, not the main meal. If you live only in ease, the first touch of difficulty will feel like a catastrophe. If you make friends with discomfort, difficulty becomes an old acquaintance, never pleasant but never paralyzing. And perhaps most importantly, this practice deepens your self-respect. When you voluntarily face what is hard, you begin to trust yourself. You'll know that when life calls on you to endure, you can endure. You've done it before, you'll do it again. That quiet trust in your own resilience is one of the most unshakable forms of confidence a human being can possess. It cannot be bought, it cannot be given, it must be earned, one act of voluntary hardship at a time. The truth is, comfort will never prepare you for life's storms. Discomfort will. By stepping into it willingly, you are not making life harder. You are making yourself harder to break. And when anger rises, when fear knocks, when emotion floods, you will stand Not because you were spared difficulty, but because you trained in it until it became your strength. But there is a final truth that underlies all the other disciplines, one the Stoics return to again and again. Life is short. The Stoics believe that only those who remember death can truly appreciate life, because only they see it without the illusion of permanence. It is also the ultimate equalizer. No matter your status, wealth, or reputation, death comes for all. This truth can strip away envy and resentment, reminding you that the person you compare yourself to is on the same road as you, walking toward the same end. What matters is not who has more now, but who lives with greater integrity, greater courage, greater kindness. When you live with death in mind, fear loses much of its sting. The worst that can happen, the end has already been accepted. Everything else becomes a challenge to meet, not a threat to avoid. And when your time comes, as it will, you will have the peace of knowing you did not waste your life on things unworthy of it. The Stoics did not meditate on death to be gloomy, but to be free from the tyranny of trivial fears, free from the chains of resentment, free from the endless postponement of what matters. In remembering the end, they became fully alive in the present. And when anger rises, when fear presses in, when emotion threatens to sweep you away, this memory stands as a quiet voice. Your time is short. Choose wisely. All of this, shaping your perception, focusing on what you can control, pausing before you act, training in discomfort, remembering the brevity of life, leads to one final truth. You cannot be ruled by emotion if you are anchored in virtue. The Stoics did not see virtue as a vague ideal, but as the steady ground beneath your feet, the thing that does not shift when fortune turns or feelings surge. Everything else is weather, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, but virtue is the sky that holds it all. For them, virtue was not a word to decorate speeches. It was the measure of a life well lived. Wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, these four formed the compass by which they navigated every decision. Wisdom to see clearly and act with understanding. Courage to face what must be faced, whether in the form of danger, loss, or uncomfortable truth. Justice to treat others with fairness and dignity, no matter what they have done or how they have treated you. Temperance to keep desires and impulses from overrunning your judgment. When you live by these, you do not need to be told how to act in each situation. You already know the direction, because the compass never changes. Anger, fear, and ungoverned emotion lose much of their pull when virtue takes priority. If justice is your guide, you do not allow anger to drive you to cruelty, because cruelty would violate your principles. If courage is your guide, you do not let fear keep you silent when truth must be spoken. If temperance is your guide, you do not indulge the quick satisfaction of revenge, because it would erode your self-mastery. If wisdom is your guide, you do not mistake momentary feelings for lasting truths. Virtue steadies you because it gives you something higher to serve than your own mood. It is easy to live well when everything is going your way, when people are kind and days are smooth. But the true measure of virtue is how you live when tested. Do you still speak honestly when dishonesty could protect you? Do you still act fairly when unfairness would benefit you? Do you still show restraint when indulging your anger would feel good in the moment? The Stoics understood that it is in difficulty that virtue becomes most visible. And if you can hold to virtue in difficulty, you have already mastered much of what it means to master yourself. Living by virtue also frees you from the constant need to calculate your every move based on other people's approval or disapproval. The person who lives for praise is a slave to the crowd. The person who lives for virtue is free because they answer to something within, not something outside. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that others may do wrong, others may judge him unfairly, others may misunderstand his motives, but none of that could touch his character unless he allowed it to. If he acted according to virtue, he had already succeeded regardless of how it was received. This is a kind of strength that cannot be taken from you. Wealth can be lost, status can be stripped away, reputation can be damaged by lies, but no one can steal your integrity. No one can reach inside you and take away your courage, your wisdom, your justice, your temperance, unless you hand them over yourself. And this is why virtue is the ultimate defense against being ruled by anger, fear, or any other passing storm. If you act in line with your principles, then even in the midst of strong emotion, you can stand by your choices without regret. Virtue also brings a deeper kind of peace. The world may still throw challenges at you, but you no longer spend your days wondering whether you are on the right path, because the path is defined by your principles, not by the shifting ground of circumstance. You stop chasing the illusion of control over outcomes and focus instead on the control you always have over the quality of your own action. That shift alone strips much of the fuel from destructive emotion, because so much of anger and fear comes from trying to control what was never yours to command. And perhaps most importantly, living by virtue gives meaning to everything else. Without it, discipline can become a form of pride, endurance can become stubbornness, even courage can become recklessness. Virtue gives these qualities their right purpose. It turns control of perception into clarity, not coldness. It turns restraint into wisdom, not weakness. It turns remembrance of death into gratitude, not despair. It aligns all the pieces you've been building so that they work together toward a life that is both strong and good. This is why the Stoics placed virtue at the center. Without it, mastery over anger, fear, and emotion would be hollow, little more than the ability to appear calm while your life drifts aimlessly. With it, your calm has direction, your strength has purpose, your discipline serves something greater than itself. You become not just unshaken, but rightly guided. When the day ends and you look back over your actions, virtue is the one measure that matters. Did you act with wisdom? Did you show courage? Were you fair? Did you keep yourself from If the answer is yes, then no matter what storms came, no matter what emotions rose and fell, you lived well. And that, in the Stoic sense, is the only victory worth having. In the end, the mastery you seek is not about eliminating emotion, but about placing it under the command of what is highest in you. Anger may still come, but it will serve justice, not vengeance. Fear may still whisper, but courage will decide. Desire may still stir, but temperance will set the boundaries. This is the kind of mastery the Stoics lived and died by, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of virtue strong enough to guide feeling toward the good. When you live this way, you are no longer at the mercy of the world, because the world can only touch what you have placed outside yourself. What matters most remains yours. And when the final moment comes, as it will, you will not have to wonder if you lived rightly. You will know. A fortune may rule the world, but it does not rule you. So live each day as though it were your last, and each choice as though it would echo for eternity.